to the UIAAA Connection podcast. GoFan and VNN are proud to be the exclusive sponsor of the UIAAA Connection. Now a combined company, GoFan and VNN provide a seamless integration for digital ticketing and athletic websites. Direct your fans to one place for all your athletic events, communications, and tickets to home and away games. Thank you to GoFan and VNN for their exclusive sponsorship of the UIAAA Connection.
Welcome back to another edition of the UIAAA Connection. I'm your host, Mark Hutch Hunter. Today we have as our special guest, Scott Carrell, the Director of Athletics at Hillcrest High School in Midvale, Utah. Scott, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Hutch. Appreciate you inviting me on.
Let's have you speak for a moment so our audience gets to know you, where you grew up, where you went to high school, your first job, those types of things.
Sure, absolutely. So I'm a local kid. I grew up here in Utah. I went to Kearns High, long line of Cougars. My parents both went to Kearns High. I'm 6 out of 7 kids in my family. All of us went to Kearns High. It was a great place to grow up, and I really enjoyed it there. I've always wanted to work with athletics. Even when I was younger, I used to pull out newspapers when they'd show up in the morning and look through scores and stats and everything like that. It wasn't until later in life when I tried some new things. I became a diesel mechanic. Actually, was one of my first jobs, and I did that for quite a while actually before getting into the school system. So. Grew up playing sports, lots of different sports, track, field, wrestling, soccer, a little baseball, a little bit of everything, some hockey in there, some volleyball. Parents tried to keep us busy, as busy as possible so that we wouldn't get involved in anything else that could distract us out there. So, great little area here. I love Utah. Love the mountains, that's for sure.
Let me ask you a couple of follow-ups. The first being, because I have no idea how old you are, so I think this may apply. So you're from Kearns. So did you spend some time skating at the Kearns Oval that was set up for the 2002 Olympics?
So I'm actually gonna date myself here. So when they were applying and trying to get the Olympics the first time, they built an outdoor oval, and I was in junior high when this was happening, and they tried to start speed skating clubs. It started with roller blades. We do speed skating clubs up there.
Uh-huh.
It was all outdoor until the Olympics were awarded. And when they were awarded, then so they built the facility out there. And so, yes, I have spent some time out there skating and played a little hockey on their rinks on the inside. And yeah, it was a fun process. That was all fields that we would go out and look for lizards when I was little, before they built that up there. So, date myself a little bit there, but yeah, I graduated in 2000 from Kearns High, but yeah, we spent a lot of time at that oval.
That's awesome. My second follow-up is diesel mechanic. You may be the first diesel mechanic I've had on the podcast, and close to 200 of them.
Yeah.
Talk for a minute about that, and talk about how you left, which I assume is a fairly lucrative job.
Yeah.
To get paid thousands and thousands of dollars being an educator.
Well, this is where my imposter syndrome comes in. I feel like I don't fit in with a lot of other athletic directors you've had on this podcast. But when I graduated high school, I went into college thinking I wanted to be an athletic trainer. Went to Solid Community College. I was working in the training room there as a student athletic trainer, and realized that I didn't want to be a trainer. So I got out of that. I did a church service mission in Illinois, where I got introduced to Caterpillar and all the cat equipment. And I just kind of fell in love with that yellow steel, and came back. My dad's a diesel mechanic, so he was my journeyman and I was his apprentice. And so I went to the diesel industry, and for about 10 years, I worked as a field mechanic for heavy duty equipment, and really, really enjoyed it. But the more you work in that industry, the more money you like. You start spending lots of extra time at work, and right as I decided to leave was one night my wife called me and she said, "Hey, your son started walking," and I froze because I said, "Wait, when did he start crawling?" And I realized I was starting to miss out a little bit on my kids growing up because I was spending so much time at work, and I was always getting called out in the middle of the night on service calls. And so we decided to make a change, and big change, in fact. I applied at a couple schools. Jordan High was one, and Hillcrest was one, just to be a computer lab aide, just someone to work in the computer lab and go back to school and get a little bit more education. Kelsey Kemp, who's over at Jordan now as a vice principal, was here at Hillcrest, and he hired me as a computer lab aide. And their softball coach had resigned, and they didn't have anyone to do that either. So I volunteered. I applied for that. I was already coaching my daughter's softball team at the time, and so I became softball coach and computer lab aide for a year. And then as summer came around, and Kelsey came back to me again and says, "You were a mechanic. We just lost our automotive teacher. It's a part-time job right now, but it's a little bit more than you were getting in the lab aide." And I was, "Sure, why not? I'll take it." Went in, was the automotive teacher, built that program back up here at Hillcrest to a full-time schedule again while coaching softball. And did that for 8 years before Greg Levitt, he's our principal, just retired. He asked me if I'd come in and be an assistant athletic director to a couple of other athletic directors, Sally Williams and Josh Griffel. And then slowly kind of worked into this position where he said, "Why don't you just do this full time?" And we hired someone to take over the shop for me. And here I am, a full-time athletic director.
That is awesome. Thanks so much for sharing.
Yeah.
Let's have you talk to our audience a little bit about some of the mentors, the leaders you've had in your life that have made a difference for you.
Sure. Yeah. Well, first, obviously, my dad, working with him, he was my journeyman when I was an apprentice mechanic, and any chance he would get, it was a life lesson he'd teach there. Something to do with wiring that I couldn't figure out. He'd, teach you how to work through, obstacles to become better, to push yourself. And he was probably my greatest influence and mentor that I've ever had. Since getting into the education system here at school, there's a couple athletic directors out there that have really, really been key players in me learning and growing and becoming better. Right? There's Trevor out at Stansbury, Cathan Beers out. He's the district athletic director now in Twilla too. Those two are two that I would call all the time and still call all the time whenever I have questions about things going on, because they know. I mean, they've been around long enough, and those really helped me to become better at where I am now. I'm nowhere near what any of them are, but something to look forward to, something that I can work for, and they're good examples for me. All three of those guys. So
it makes me feel just a little bit old, because had I been younger, you could have called me a Jordan. But of course, by the time you came along, I've been gone from there for 11 years. My goodness. I kept thinking today, there's kids that are juniors in high school that were in kindergarten when I left. And so that's how long I've been gone. So good for you.
Yeah, thank you.
Let me ask you a little bit of a personal question.
Sure.
What's your biggest failure or disappointment in life, and what did you learn from it?
I wish if I could go back and do it over again, I think that I would really put a little bit more emphasis into being a student athlete rather than just trying to have fun doing athletics. I was an average kid for academics. If I would have worked harder, I think I could have done better. And I think that would have transitioned into athletics for me, with high school football and high school wrestling and even high school baseball. I got cut from the high school baseball team, and I'm pretty sure it's because I didn't give I didn't give my all to the tryout. But I think that if I could have gone back and given more and dedicated more, or even just focused a little more, I probably wouldn't be in a position now where I have to try to get more education to continue getting certifications. And I've tried to teach my kids that, try to get your schooling done, work hard now while you're in high school on all this stuff. And it's paying off. My daughter's just got recruited up to the College of Southern Idaho to play softball, and her grades helped her with that for sure, and her dedication to that sport. I wish I would have had half of her dedication when I was in high school. So I think if I go back when I was younger, I would have tried to have been more dedicated for sure to athletics and to academics.
Some great insight. Thanks so much for sharing that. Let's have you talk for a moment about the job of becoming a director of athletics. How is it different in 2024 than when you took over And when you first became involved as an assistant AD.
So 2017, 2018 is when I first started as an assistant and working into it. COVID happened, right? I mean, before the COVID happened, it was, it was a lot of face-to-face interactions, a lot more. It didn't seem like there was as much paperwork type stuff, as well as more administrative stuff. That I was teaching full time, and I'd have one class for being an athletic director, and that was up until 2022 that was happening. Right, I had one period for athletic directing, the rest I was still teaching full time automotive. The job has changed now, where I have to be full time. Right, there's not enough time in the day, even now. If I show up at 7 a.m, try to get all my paperwork done, get all the register my athlete done, make sure eligibility, check with coaches, I still stay here past 6 o'clock at night some days, because on non-game days, just because we're trying to stay ahead of things and get caught up. And, everything was status quo when I first started. This is the way we do it. This is the way we always do it. But since then, the job has changed so much that we're always looking for better ways to make our athletics and our academics and our school a better place, right? We want to be better in the community. We want to be better at the state level. We want to be more recognizable. It's a constant rejuvenation, right? I don't even know if it's the right word I'm looking for, but you're constantly looking for a way to be better. And so we're always looking for ways to change. Going to conferences helps that a lot, because that helps us to find out what other people are doing, that we can help improve our school and what people think of us and how our students react here at school.
Some great insight. Thanks so much for sharing. Let's have you talk now about your journey with the UIAAA. Talk about, well, how you became involved, how you heard about it. And then once you go through that, then talk about your observations regarding, I say the recent national conference, but by the time this airs, it will have been 10 months ago,
right?
Orlando. So take over both those questions.
Yeah, for sure. So the superintendent that came in, Rick Robbins, came in, and he said, "Hey, I want to pay for you guys all to go down to the state conference and to the national conference." I had never been, so I didn't really know what it was. So I went to that state conference. My first time going down there. And that's when I first learned about the UIAAA. That's where I learned about certification, the classes you can take, the networking. Oh my gosh, the networking is amazing. And I was just the UIAAA, right? Meeting all the Utah directors and getting insight from them and seeing what they have done, and the classes that have helped me learn more about the job and what the job actually is. The encouragement to become certified all came through the UIAAA, which has been one of, if not one of the best, if not the best, resources for me as an athletic director. Right, everyone that I can go talk to and I go see, they talk about, hey, we talked about this at conference. We did this at conference. And the same thing at national. Last one we went to was Orlando, and I was lucky enough that I've been able to go to, I went to Denver, then to Nashville, then to Orlando, and the networking. I've been able to learn things from other athletic directors from across the country that we've been able to collaborate on. It's helped us at Hillcrest rebuild our athletic handbook. We've never really had a handbook, but we're able to rebuild our athletic handbook to help everyone understand the expectations of what we are doing here. The students first, then their athletes, and this is where the role of a parent, the role of the coach, the role of the athletic director. This is how we're going to help your kids succeed. And my biggest benefit from any of these conferences has been the networking. I think the classes have been great. Being as I'm taking the alternate route. Right, I had to do the alternate route licensure for teaching. Well, I have to do something similar for the CAA, right? I have to take a little bit more classes, be an athletic director a little bit longer, and this really helps with all that because they offer so many classes that really benefit me as a person as well as the school, and that's what I like the most about the classes too. So,
Thank you. And I give a shout out to Rick Robbins, Dr. Rick Robbins, who's a close personal friend of mine. But the fact that he supports all the ADs in the Canyons District, which I worked in for years and years,
Yeah.
that he sends into the national conference, sends to the state conference is such, well, it's foresight that some of the superintendents in front of him didn't have. So a shout out to him. So your first conference was Denver then, or was it
Yep.
Nashville?
No, my first conference was Denver.
When we still had the masks on. So talk about that.
Yep. We still have the masks on. It was actually nice because I took my principal and my vice principal with me to that. And I think that is what finally convinced Hillcrest to make my position a full-time position, to use that FTE that they use for automotive or for other teachers and turn one into just an athletic director. Was they saw what all these other schools are doing. They saw what all these principals that are also athletic directors across the country, some that do both. And my principal said he definitely didn't want to do that. So he wanted me to make sure, I was taking care of his full-time AD and took care of all that off his plate for him. And it was definitely a new experience. Everybody's in masks still. It was nice because you're really close there in Denver to the hotel, but that was our first eye opener of actually how big this position is, and all over the world. I mean, we were meeting people from Australia and from South America, and just that was a huge benefit for me at the school here and our school to realize what this position actually could entail and should entail and should work for and towards.
Let me ask you a question about a good friend of mine. By the time this airs, she will have been on the podcast. Talk about your beginnings with Sally Williams, who's just lives around the corner from me.
Yeah. So when I started at Hillcrest, Sally was the volleyball coach and I was the softball coach. And I'd always, hey, I want to recruit your players. I want to recruit your players. And she was working really hard to build her volleyball program, which she did an amazing job with, and build a great volleyball program here before she left to start pursuing her admin license. And then it was her and Josh Griffel that were co-athletic directors when I was first the assistant athletic director. And Josh only did it for a year before he left to take over an insurance company from a family member. And then Sally and I worked together. And Sally and I did really well. We tried to split everything up, but both of us we taught full-time schedules and had one class for AD, both of us. And so we tried to come up with, and I think she went to a national conference before I did. I think she went out to Washington, D.C. for one, and that's when she started to learn more about this. And so we'd sit in our office because we share an office at the time, and we'd go over everything she learned at that conference. And this is the ways we can really help to improve. And at the time, I was kind of held back a little bit, like, are you sure that's what we need here at Hillcrest? Are you sure that's what we need here at Hillcrest? And she was adamant. And the more I bought into what she was saying, the more I realized that, there's a huge potential here, not just at Hillcrest, but in Utah with athletics and students and being able to grow programs and turn them into successful, right? Like, I mean, whatever you define success as, ours was, we want our kids to participate and graduate. And if they get a chance to move on and play college, let's do it. And so we found ways to evaluate our programs a little bit better because of Sally. I still get to work with Sally. She's over at the district office now, and she's actually helped create District Athletic Director PLC for all the athletic directors here in Canyon School District. We meet once a month, and we go over some professional development ideas. We go over some PLC ideas, things that we can communicate or work better on together. Our new district athletic director and director of secondary schools, Tom Sherwood's involved with it. And it really helps all of us. I can talk to Sonny over at Jordan and say, hey, what are you doing with this type of situation? And that networking, those conversations come a lot easier. And a lot of that started because Sally went to that conference in Washington and brought a lot of those ideas back, not just to Hillcrest, but to the district.
Excellent. What's the favorite part of your job, Scott?
The kids, absolutely. We do that milk grant every year, and I make sure that I put milk in my fridge right here behind me, and kids come get milk for me. I can sit and talk to them for a minute and then try to create that relationship that they feel like they can come to me with questions and successes, and they know I'm there to support them, and I cheer on every single one of them every chance I can get. It is absolutely the biggest reason I do this. So like we talked about, I left a lucrative business of diesel mechanics to work here, make my millions as an athletic director, So
absolutely. Millions as an AD. I love the way you said that. Let's finish up with a couple of questions.
Sure.
The first one being, you've got advice for a brand new athletic director, and they need to follow Scott's advice in order for them to become successful. What would your 2 suggestions be?
2 suggestions. First one is make meaningful relationships and connections with the whole building. Teachers, counselors, administrators, secretaries, students, all of them. If you can make those meaningful connections, then people will trust you and you can trust them. It makes your job a lot easier that I can ask for help from someone, or they can ask for help from me. If I have a student struggling with a teacher, there's that connection that we can go to get together and figure out anything we need to. Those meaningful connections and relationships are huge. And the second one is network outside the building, right? Get to know, get involved with UIAAA, get involved with your region ADs and the NIAAA. If you create those connections outside the building as well, you'll realize there's a lot of schools very similar to yours. Even though you may not feel like you have those in Utah or even in your district, there's a lot of schools out there very similar to yours that if you have those connections with, they may have seen something that you're going through and they might have some good advice for you. But those would be my 2 biggest things: is create those connections in the building and then get involved outside the building.
Great suggestions. We'll finish with this, Scott. What question should I have asked you that I failed to ask you?
Oh, that's a tough one. I guess you could ask why I was crazy enough to do this, but
So
I don't know.
Why were you crazy enough to do this?
Yeah, it's all about the kids, right? Like, and I learned that it's all about the kids, right? Watching those kids smile, those kids celebrate little victories, even makes all the hard work, all the extra paperwork, all the extra meetings, it makes it all worth it when you get to see those kids excited. I do get that question actually a lot of why would you take this job? But it's absolutely one of the best things in the world to see that kid smile after a great game, even if they lost, right? But they performed well, and it's like seeing, even with my own kids that will be here at Hillcrest now too, is just seeing that excitement makes it all worth it.
Couldn't have said it better myself. On that note, that wraps up this edition of the UIAAA Connection. Again, our special guest today has been Scott Carrell, the Director of Athletics at Hillcrest High School. Scott, thanks once again for being on the podcast.
Thank you for having me.
For our listeners, we hope you tune in again next week for another edition of the UIAAA Connection.